Jennie, are these family cemeteries protected today?
This one is.
All of them supposed to be protected.
Well, the county, I'm on the Cemetery Advisory Board, and now the planning department, where we identify cemeteries you can't build without going through planning department. But that don't mean somebody can come along and tear one up before we know about it.
Yeah.
We got everybody in here?
Not quite.
All right, any of you Stepp descendants, which there are several, Joy, there's your ancestors. Where that Revolutionary War marker is, get your photos while we're waiting. That is James Stepp and Polly Mills Stepp, the famous Polly Mills Stepp, of all the Fitzsimmons and local legends, and the Point Lookout and the Indians. That is the famous Polly Mills Stepp, first cousin of William Mills, and her husband James Stepp.
Jennie, where's Point Lookout?
Point Lookout's in Edneyville. East side of the Continental Divide in the Edneyville community, not too far from,
Crime center.
that wasn't the Point Lookout. The Point Lookout where they fought was Old Fort, McDowell County. As I said, there are several Stepp cemeteries in Dana. This is what we call Stepp Cemetery at Red Hill. At Red Hill. We passed another Stepp Cemetery, if you notice, coming down. That's Stepp Cemetery at Round Hill. Where we came out of Stepp Mill Road and made a right-hand turn, if we had gone left and gone back up in by High Union Hill Church and all, there's an old cemetery down in there at the bottom of the mountain called Stepp Cemetery at Golden Hill. That Golden Hill Stepp Cemetery is where they say, rumors are, there used to be an old gold mine, but it never produced any gold that anybody ever mentioned. Golden Hill had a church and a school at one time in the very late 1800s and early 1900s. But we're not going there. Golden Hill, the Stepp Cemetery at Golden Hill, Joy, remember, is the one where they had the great cemetery desecration and they took the skull and opened up a grave and the skull's still at the Sheriff's Department. This is Stepp Cemetery at Red Hill. This area was all Stepp land, all the way from Union Hill, down along the Little Hungry Creek, all the way through this section. This is near the confluence of the Little Hungry Creek into the Big Hungry River, right in this section. This is the very first settlers into Henderson County. Right here, James Stepp and Polly Mills Stepp. There was no William Mills. They were here in the 1770s during the Revolutionary War when they had to go to the Point Lookout in Pisgah National Forest at Old Fort, where the fort was to protect the settlers against the Cherokee. That's where Polly Mills Stepp and them got into that Indian thing when the Cherokee attacked Old Fort on Point Lookout. This is east of the Continental Divide. Remember, Governor Tryon met at the bottom of Tryon Mountain and opened up east of the Continental Divide. We have traced James Stepp's deeds. This is the description of when the British troops came through and found the log cabin with Polly Mills Stepp there. James Stepp was gone and Polly Mills Stepp was there and the Indians had attacked and she had been scalped but lived through it. And so we're talking Revolutionary War here. That is Polly Mills Stepp. That is James Stepp. Now, whether or not he's a Revolutionary War veteran, I cannot tell you, because the only thing that says he was a pay voucher. Well, that pay voucher could have been given for him giving them cornmeal. I mean, that doesn't mean he actually fought. So I'm not sure why he got approved for DAR. And the reason I question that is because Polly Mills' family were Tories. So, and that's well established. Her uncle was the head of the entire Tory unit in the state of North Carolina, Ambrose Mills. So I have some serious issues as to whether James Stepp actually fought with the Patriots. There's no record he fought anywhere with the Patriots. The only thing is a pay voucher. That's it. And I wouldn't have brought you guys all down here except this is the story of the legends. This is these very first settlers. And when you start tracing back who was in this eastern section of the Continental Divide prior to when this county, whole county officially opened in 1783, it was the Stepps and the Cases. And where did the Stepps and Cases live? East of the Continental Divide here in Damon.
You know the location?
Now the Case had an Indian, a Cherokee wife. You with me? Mm-hmm. And he was an Indian trader prior to the Revolutionary War. We think he was living out in the Edneyville section east of the Continental Divide, but hundreds of those descendants have moved this direction, you know. So they were very early in here. If you look at those old deeds, you're talking early 1780s. Any questions on any of that?
Hey, this is Gary King, and I'm running this little video this morning, not to be contentious in any way, but I just want to augment the video that this is the first land grant that Samuel King applied for in what is now Henderson County. At the time it was Rutherford County. The entire area was Rutherford County, most of it. The land grant was issued 29 November 1790, but it was applied for on 1 August 1778. Now, for land grants to be, before they were granted, a proper application had to be made. Along with the application, a survey had to be entered. I mean, the land had to have been surveyed prior to August the 1st, 1778, because that's the date of the application. So obviously Samuel King was here prior to August of 1778. His last documents, military service with the 11th Virginia Regiment, was still he was at Valley Forge in the spring of 1778, March and April. So I contend that most likely it was right then, upon leaving Valley Forge, that Samuel King came home and packed his family, and along with many others that were leaving Virginia at the time for North Carolina Colony, or the Carolina Colony they called it, and traveled down the old wagon road to get there. This is a stack of land grants. I received these from the State Archives in Raleigh a few months back, and that's just an indication of the amount of land that Samuel owned, and that's land he received by land grant. Once the application was processed, they had to check and make sure no one else had claim to that land, and taxes had to be paid. And in that case, it was almost a 12-year process. This is a stack of deeds of land where Samuel King purchased land.
There was a mill here. And we're going to leave here. We're going to go back up Alita Road, and we're going to come right back out at Refuge. Tumblebug Creek is below Refuge Baptist. Where the Alita Mill was a grist mill, same guy that had the Saccanon that we were just at, and it was Benjamin Merrill and his wife Alice Stepp. It was 1908, 1913, that was the period of time. He had a grist mill. He named the post office Oleta. He closed it in 1913 when he went over to Saccanon. So Oleta Post Office only existed from 1908 to 1913. His grist mill on Tumblebug Creek was only in a short period of time in the early 1900s to 1913. You're going to see pictures and things in Fitzsimmons about a Jones lumber mill down here. I don't know. Bob and I and all us Jones descendants have no clue what that's about, because the huge Jones lumber mill was not down here. This was Stepp land. This was not Jones land. And if there was a sawmill down here and it was a Jones, we don't know what Jones it was. And they're saying a John Jones. Well, what John Jones? Everett Jones had a son named John. I have no idea what John Jones they're talking about. My guess, Bob and I were talking earlier, maybe a John Jones married a Stepp. I don't know. But if there was a sawmill in this area, it wasn't huge. There's actually pictures of it, which means it's going to be after 1900. Duke Power started buying all of this land up about 1913. So I don't know how long that sawmill would have been in existence. I don't know who owned it. There's a picture of it. It was right at the base of Oleta Falls. But I've got to track the deeds back because I don't know who owned that property. And I think people are putting that Jones name on there when it wasn't Jones. Because the Jones, huge Jones lumber sawmill that everybody writes about, that's on the Big Hungry, where we're going this afternoon. So I don't know who owned this lumber mill down here at the base of Oleta Falls, so I got to do research on it.
How far is Oleta Falls from?
How far is it to the falls?
About 3/4 of a mile to a mile.
3/4 of a mile to a mile.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
also another
the
cemetery
height.
on Bradley
Yeah, the height.
Mountain.
Yeah.
Which direction's Bradley Mountain?
Right up there.
Okay,
The
Bradley
cemetery
Mountain's
up top
right
of
up
the
there.
Bradley's buried up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Reese Bradley and his wife, who was a Stepp. Now, Reese Bradley was from the Bradleys in Polk County. If you go directly back here, you're in Polk County. This is game land, so you're going right into Polk County. And Reese Bradley's from the Halbert Cove, Green River Cove section, the Bradleys down there in Polk County. He married a Stepp, but the particular Stepp he married was the daughter of Hezekiah Drake. Hezekiah Drake had an affair with a Stepp woman and had 4 children. And one of his children, I think it was Maholda. I think it was Maholda, but I could be wrong. Stepp married Reese Bradley, and they're buried on the top of Bradley Mountain, which is part of this huge subdivision. So there's some graves right up there too. What else did I need to say? I talked about the Stepp cemeteries. This is the Little Hungry Creek area. Adams Run School, William, where's William? Adams Run School was somewhere in this section of Oleta Falls. So I don't know exactly where the school was, but it was in this section of the community, where the Little Hungry meets the Big Hungry. Somewhere around in this area was Adams Run School. They had to, or they wouldn't have been buried here. This is the home place. This is the James Stepp, Holly Mill Stepp home place. This is all that's buried here, is them and their kids, and maybe some grandkids. Yep.
I don't know if you heard the story, but Mrs. Ward told us a story about Bradley, supposedly, story or legend. The reason he chose to be buried at the top of the mountain was because he was a mean old cuss. So mean that he thought that that was as close to heaven as he'd ever going to get.
And no one else wanted him to be buried near them.
Yeah.
Well, they lived up there though.
And just the couple raw stones.
That was their home place, and they never had any children
Okay.
that I've traced because I did some genealogy on them. I don't think they had any kids, but I could be wrong about that. But Frank Ballard and Joey Franklin, that's that same Hezekiah Drake that owned all the land where St. Mary's is. You guys, okay. Same family.
I think it was Nathan, who's his brother, who actually owns the area. But it's the same
Right.
family.
It's
And
same
they
family.
own that whole area.
They own the whole area, all the way to Drake Mountain back up in there. Yeah. We're going to be leaving here, and when we turn left at the red light back onto Ridge Road, Upward Road, I'm going to point out the window to where you're going to see a road and a sign that says Hideaway Kennels. We're not going there, but if you were to turn down that road and drive a little piece on the right, you're going to see the oldest apple packing house in Henderson County, and it's still standing. And it had the first cold storage unit in any packing house in Henderson County. And you know who owned it? Melvin Lane, who moved here from New York, got involved with the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service, planted that whole area in apple orchards, built the first apple packing house, the first cold storage unit, and he is the Melvin Lane of the Lane Wing at Pardee Hospital.
Still in operation?
His daughter still owns all that property, The original house is still standing because she moved down here in the early 1900s. She lives in Chicago most of the year, but we didn't have enough time for me to, like try to contact her to see if they were even here at this time and go through. Rex McCall of the McCall clan in this area, he manages that place and caretakes it. So we could have actually gone there, but I didn't want to do it. But I did do a story with photos for the Times I'll try to get it on the web. But I'm going to show you which road that would be going if you ever want to drive down it and look up to your right, and you can see some of this old stuff up in there. We're going to Larry Ball's house. You've got to follow us closely. We're going to have to get back into our cars. Larry's waiting on us. He's got to have heart surgery Thursday. When I was there Wednesday, his arm and hand were swollen terribly. I don't want him walking up the stairs inside his 3-story house. I want to tell you before we get there, he is not good on local history. He's good on his artifacts. He knows where everything he's got there came from, and he's got thousands of them. I don't mean a few or a few hundred, I mean thousands. Be very careful walking through that house because you can't walk without stepping on pottery or a butter churn or something. We're first going to go to the lower section where he set up a water ram that you're going to actually see operate. The original curb market sign, old farm implements, all kinds of things that you're going to be so astounded, it's going to be amazing. When we go back up to the top, the 2 log cabins there, he gets confused. One of the log cabins was a Phillips cabin, and she lived in the deep gap section, and he may tell you the story of this little girl that got left alone, orphaned at a funeral, and she took her in, and it was Phillips. She was actually Anthrop Phillips. It's called the Ankie Phillips cabin, and he's got that log cabin there. He has the Justice cabin of the daughter of, Gary? The daughter of Hiram King was Polly King.
Justice.
And she married Justice.
Yes.
What's his first name? Was it Hiram Justice or James or? I'm looking and I think I forgot.
I'd have to go back and look.
Well, at any rate, he has the cabin that Polly King Justice and her husband lived in.
Called Dr. Polly because she was a midwife.
She was the most famous granny doctor in the area.
Yeah.
Now, he's got that log cabin. He gets it confused, and he'll tell you it's the Hiram King cabin. It's not the Hiram King cabin, and it's not as old as he says it is. It was built by Justice, and she's the daughter of Hiram King, and she was the famous granny doctor. So he does get confused on some of his history, so don't take everything he says and think it's absolutely correct. But he can tell you where he built the home he lives in out of crumbling chimney remains and buildings they were tearing down all over the county. And he can tell you this stair came from a house they were tearing down on Jeter Mountain. And this came from a house they were tearing down here. And this came from a house they were tearing down here. And all this wood and all the stonework is old.
Wow.
We're talking 1800s up, okay? You're going to be shocked, you're going to be amazed, and they're all there waiting on us. We got people there waiting on us.
How old is he?
Huh?
How old is he?
I'm not sure how old Larry Ball is.
Larry's about 78.
He knew everybody in my family, that's all I'm kidding. He knows everybody. He knows everybody in the county, but he's getting things confused.
Sure.
As far as history, a little bit. And wonderful. And he's gotten ill all of a sudden. Don't let him go up and down the stairs. Just go look and try not to get him to go up and down, or you're going to have to help him up. I don't want to deal with that.